Welcome back to Founding Footprints, a podcast sponsored by the Virginia 250 Commission in partnership with the Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau, the CACVB. The CACVB has developed thematic itineraries to pair with each episode. See what they've developed for this episode at visitcharlottesville.org. I'm Ben Bernard, historian at the University of Virginia. For this installment, I met Luca Paschina, a winemaker from the Piedmont region of Italy, and now the General Manager of Barboursville Vineyards in the Piedmont region of Virginia. The first time I visited Barboursville Vineyards, I was surprised to find the ruins of an 18th century neoclassical mansion, which, it turns out, was designed by Thomas Jefferson for his much younger friend James Barbour, governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia in 1828. The vineyard and the history of winemaking in this region connect very neatly to that revolutionary period. Could you start off by telling us who you are, what you do?
My name is Luca Paschina, and I am Italian. I was born in Italy, in Torino, and I moved to Virginia in 1990. I moved here to take care of the operation of the farming, winemaking, and managing of Barboursville Vineyards, and I have been here since 1990. Having a great time.
That's amazing. It turns out it's another anniversary. I've heard that it's Barboursville Vineyards' 50th anniversary. Is that correct?
Yes, the estate was purchased by an Italian family of vintners, the Zoning family, in April 13 of 1976. So next April 13, officially, we have become 50. The other great coincidence is that when it was purchased, our founder didn't realize, but it was on Thomas Jefferson's birthday on the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. So we're going to be 250 and 50 next April.
Could you tell us a little bit about Barboursville Vineyards and its activity today first?
Yes. It is an 830-some acres farm that is focused on farming of grapes predominantly. We also do have some cattle. We do raise some hogs for our salami that we serve on the estate. We have some hay fields. We have some pastures, woodland. So we are maintaining a very beautiful open space of over 800 acres. And from the farming of the grapes is where we then transform into wine. And through years, we have created an amazing food wine experience. And also we have amazing lodging. Our goal was to create what we describe as an estate of wine. So everything revolves around the wine, even though wine is a beautiful beverage that is it can have a lot of meaning. It can be a very meaningful farm product, but it requires also to create an experience around it. So it's about landscape, it's about hospitality, it's about people.
That's wonderful. I'm curious about the Italian connection. I have to tell you, one of the best food weekends of my entire life, outside of Charlottesville, of course, was in Turin. And I just remember, the nebbiolo, the pasta, the 19th century cafes everywhere. How does the wine in our part of Virginia compare with the Piedmont, Italy wine?
I would say that in the very beginning when I came, we were still far away. I even recall in those years you mentioned Charlottesville restaurant. There were very few seriously good restaurants in 1990. Today, it's incredible the amount of amazing chefs we have. So I really witnessed what I describe as the food and wine revolution of Virginia. It happened from the 90s on. And we are to a level of quality both of wine and also on the food that can be prepared and found in our region, that it's equally as good as what we have in Piemonte, where I'm from. And I'm not saying it just because I love myself more than where I come from. I'm just saying because that's the way it is. It's the truth. We have received quite a few visitors from Europe, and they all come without any preconceived notions because they're open-minded. If somebody comes from California or Oregon or New York State or their wine region, they may be a little bit, thinking that maybe it's not as possible that Virginia makes wine as good as they do there. But open-minded people, they are gladly surprised to find an amazing philosophy of food and wine and hospitality they have created patiently through decades, not just Barboursville, but other. And the other great thing is that we have so many winemakers from all over the world moving here, bringing talents, chefs from all over the U.S. coming here because they know it's a place really we are very focused and meaningful about what we do.
Do you have a philosophy of food and wine?
Yes, my philosophy of food and wine, it comes from my childhood and my family. Growing up, I was exposed to very simple food, very simply prepared, but with very wholesome ingredients. And I also had grandparents. One was a beekeeper, and he was making sausages and salami once a month. I grew up buying our own milk on the mountain straight from the farmer. For me, food was always something you gather it locally, you bring it home, you cook it yourself. I was not exposed to cookies or things that come wrapped in a single container till I was 9 or 10 year old. So I bring the same philosophy here and on our estate with our chef. We are very particular about finding the best ingredients. Most preparation in Italian cooking are very straightforward and simple. A lot of things are handmade, like the pasta, the gnocchi. My philosophy is simple. Select right ingredient, balance aromatics, never push spices too far. So that's about it.
And what characterizes the wines that you produce?
Overall, it comes from a choice that we take from the beginning as farmers. And the choice is where you plant. And you have to make the choice very, very well. Also, you have to really choose the right variety of grape to match with your soil and your climate. And climate, we talk about Virginia climate, we can talk generically, but we would make a mistake. You have to speak specifically to where you are. At Barboursville, we have experimented with many varieties through the years. At the beginning, we have no reference because nobody had ever done it. Some work well, some didn't. Therefore, through the years, we discontinued those that didn't produce a very good wine, like Riesling, Pinot Noir, Gewürztraminer. Those three in our estate don't do so good at all. The one that works very well for our estate would be Cabernet Franc, Merlot, Nebbiolo in the red categories. In the white varieties, we're still focusing a lot on Pinot Grigio, which is a very good entry-level wine, very fragrant. And lately, we've been focusing a lot on Vermentino, which is a grape grown on the island of Sardinia, that does well in warm to hot climates like we have in Virginia. We will, there are a lot of many more varieties we could experiment with, although my approach is not to try new things, is to perfection those that already are giving us great consistency between the shift of the season in Virginia, which you go from a wet season to a dry season, anything in between. So you want to focus on grapes that can produce a good wine in a tough season, in a great wine in a great season. And that's what we grow is what we have learned does that.
Can you tell me a little bit about the creation and growth of the Monticello AVA?
Yeah, the Monticello AVA is quite old. It goes from the 80s and is a fairly large tract of land. And the growth per se of the size, it's not changed. What has grown is the number of vineyards that are in the appellation. And what has grown the most is the recognition for being a region in Virginia that delivers with a lot of consistency. We have a lot of people from France, from Italy, from South Africa, some from the West Coast, Finger Lakes. So we're attracting more and more talents to the area because it's so renowned to produce wines that are comparable to some of the best wines from other parts of the world. It took some time. It took a few decades. We're a very, very young growing season. And I tell people to start a vineyard, it takes 2 years to prepare the soil. Then you go in the ground. Then 3 years later, you pick your first crop. If it's a great season and you're aiming to produce a beautiful red Bordeaux blend, then 5 years out, you produce the wine. You age it for a year in barrel or more. You have to age it a couple years in bottle. So you're 8 years out. So it takes time. That's why it took several decades. And having spent time and staying committed to that, it paid off.
What's amazing about what you've just said is that it takes 8 years really to get your first production
Yes.
going, but then it takes many more years to be experimenting, to be
Absolutely.
branching out.
Absolutely.
So really 50 years seems like a really important benchmark.
Yes.
You know, listeners may be wondering why we're talking about wine from the 1980s and 90s in a podcast about the American Revolution. I was hoping you might be able to tell me a little bit about your sense of the deep history of winemaking in this region.
I wasn't here in the 70s and 80s, of course.
I did a little bit of reading on this, and it turns out there is a long prehistory of Italian wines in this region. Have you heard of Philippe Mazzei?
Of course.
Yeah, what have you heard about him?
Well, Filippo Mazzei was a merchant. He became acquainted with Thomas Jefferson, and Jefferson shared with him his desire to produce wines at Monticello. Also wanted to plant citrus trees and olives. So Filippo Mazzei was instrumental to helping to import live plants. But not only, he even brought in Italian immigrants from Tuscany. Among them, one of them is the Gianninis, and they were tending the vineyard and tending also other crops at Monticello. Jefferson also always had this vision to produce wines locally and not having to be subject to crazy prices from imported wine. He had a very good palate for wine. He was importing Chateau Lafite, which already back then was very expensive. Today is among the best wines. And he grew tired of it and said, I want to be independent. So Mazzei was very instrumental with Jefferson. And I say he learned a lot of things from him. Among them also was politics, European politics, but also about art, about music, about agriculture. So it was a very influential person in his life.
Before we go any further, let me tell you a bit more about Filippo Mazzei, a Florentine, multi-talented guy born in 1730, died in 1816. His life really spanned the age of revolutions. After years in London as a wine merchant, he arrived in Virginia in 1773 with dreams of agronomic projects, following his friend he had met in London, Thomas Jefferson. Collaborations together seemed promising, and during this time, Mazzei became politically active as well. So from 1779 to 84, the Commonwealth of Virginia hired him to return to Europe as an agent of revolution, a sort of intelligence operative, gathering news, but also spreading news of the American Revolution. So Mazzei is really viewed as an enthusiastic partisan of liberty and a mediator of these transatlantic revolutionary movements. Today, Mazzei's birth town of Poggio e Caiano is Charlottesville's Italian sister city.
His last planting at Monticello was in 1807. 24 varieties planted. Among them, 22 were from Europe, a couple were American. Nothing came of it, and no wine was ever produced, and the vineyard apparently was destroyed. And so there's a big gap. From 1807, you go to 1976.
Oh, to 1976.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, 1976,
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
To see successful planting of European grapes that bear fruit and then continue to survive. The main one was at Barboursville in 76, and Gabriele Rause was very instrumental as the first manager to take care of this planting. There was also another small planting that happened a couple years earlier in the Bindelburg area. A winery planted a little bit of Chardonnay. So before that was mainly Native American grapes like Concord or Norton. And so that's the connection, Barboursville and Jefferson also.
Why do you think it took so long? Why do you think there was such a long gap through the entire 19th century?
There are different opinions of why Thomas Jefferson plantings of European grapes failed. Nevertheless, is shipping live plants from Europe to here by boat. It could be subject to dehydration, what have you. But also, in my opinion, what is the main threat that likely killed the vines is an insect that is lethal for European vines, that kills the vine through the root system.
Between the revolutionary period and today, probably the biggest rupture in the history of wine is the phylloxera epidemic. Thomas Jefferson, it turns out, got a small preview of it at Monticello.
Although this insect thrives on Native American grapes that are all over the mountains here in Virginia, the insect lives only on the native plants. A portion of the cycle is above ground and a portion is underground. And when European grapes are exposed to this insect, they are killed through the root system by it. So what happened is that in the mid-1800s, European wineries imported Concord from the U.S. because they didn't have there a grape that was so uniquely aromatic. So they brought plants and along with them brought also the insect. So by the late 1800s, almost all of the vineyards of Europe were killed. And it was a big crisis, so they figured out what was the root cause. And they discovered that if they were to graft the European vine on an American rootstock, basically you put a stick of Concord in the ground, it starts rooting, then the plant grows, and then as it grows, you graft on it the European vines. You're now breaking the killing cycle because the portion of the European grape above ground is resistant to phylloxera. And that's how they restarted viticulture. First, the insect destroyed it and saved it. But then subsequently, we were able to grow European grapes in Virginia because we were grafting them on the Native American vine. Jefferson didn't know about the existence of the insect, neither did the European. It only became observed as existing as an insect in the late 1800s. Is minuscule in size. Nobody ever cataloged it until that point.
While Virginia wines didn't take off during Filippo Mazzei's time, that would be accomplished many years later by the Zonin family.
The Zonin family comes from the town in Gambellara, which is close to Vicenza, in Veneto, in the northeast, about 25 minutes from the city of Verona and Vicenza. The family has been in viticulture since 1821, and in the turn of the 1900s, about 1930s, they start investing in winemaking, and they start distributing wine in the region. And then in the 60s and early 70s, when they start to expand their plantings outside of Veneto. So they invest in Tuscany, in Piemonte, in Lombardy, in Friuli, Puglia,
This is kind of
Sicily.
around northern, central Italy and Sicily.
Yeah, and then in mid-70s, our founder, Gianni Zrin, decided to look into the United States to establish a winery there, and first considers Napa Valley, Central Valley, and then he hears also about the Finger Lakes, where they're producing a lot of wine. He liked California a lot. He didn't like, in the end, New York Finger Lakes in those years because they were mainly producing Concord and fortified wines. Virginia came by a coincidence, which is really cool. It's because he had a friend.
I learned from Luca that the Zonins knew the late eminent UVA architecture professor Mario di Valmarana, and among his accomplishments is founding the University of Virginia's program in Venice.
And Mario said, why don't you consider Virginia? I've been here a few years. I can tell you it's very similar, the climate. I think that you should be able to produce great wines here. And that was sufficient for our founder to say, okay, I will consider and I will come to Virginia. And when he came, he very quickly understood that there was a chance to be the first vintner to produce a decent glass of wine in a region where no one has ever done it before. And I have received his students at Barboursville many times through the years to visit the ruins of Barboursville, because being just a wall remaining, you can really see the construction in the making, and is very similar to the construction to the floor plan of Monticello.
That's right. It's a kind of the ruins of a kind of classical
Absolutely
house.
The whole design of the home came from Thomas Jefferson for Governor James Barbour. And the rotunda that it is at UVA is exactly the rotunda that it is in Vicenza, that Mario knows like the palm of his hand since he was a young student of architecture when he was in Italy.
That's amazing. I would have never guessed that Barboursville Vineyards had this University of Virginia connection, this connection with Palladio.
Absolutely.
And
Our flagship red wine is called Octagon. Octagon because several reasons. Thomas Jefferson in all of his building had an octagonal shape. Poplar Forest is octagonal. Monticello has an octagonal, the parlor, as it is the ruins. The capital of Virginia has a big octagonal room. And also Jefferson, like we spoke, was the first individual to be planting European varieties. So the connection with the old world and the new world is so strong on our estate that Octagon was the name of the wine, and on the wine, on the label, there is the floor plan of the building.
I see this old world, new world connection too in the personal trajectories of your founder and of you. Maybe is there a story here also of immigration to America, of the kind of possibility that America offers?
Absolutely. I was very attracted to work outside of Italy in my late 20s. I was fortunate to travel quite a bit. I worked in the US, in Switzerland. I worked in the Penedès in Spain. I did a lot of travel in East Germany, Poland, Yugoslavia. I was trading wine from Italy. So I travel a lot abroad. And I really like this opportunity because I come from a region where everything is predetermined. The region where you can grow grapes are clearly designed. The grapes you can grow are those, no others. The way you space the vines in between each other is predetermined, which is a good thing. But it didn't fit my type of personality.
And it's a contrast to the ethos of the New World.
Yes.
Where you can kind of reinvent these older traditions.
And coming to Virginia was amazing. Yeah, I had a big blank canvas to draw whatever I wanted on it, to experiment whatever I wanted. So we introduced new varieties, we try new things. It has been fascinating, and it worked. Not everything worked, but what worked, we noticed it, and we implemented it. And although people ask, are you going to retire, going back to Italy? I say, no. I will retire when I retire on the estate. I love it. And I will spend long vacations in Italy because for me, this is my home.
After the interview with Luca Paschina, WTJU producer Sage Tanguay and I were discussing his account of that phylloxera pest crisis that decimated European wines. The solution to resisting those pests was transplanting and grafting European grapes with American stocks. And we were struck by how this technique is also perhaps a useful metaphor for the age of revolutions, with both colonial and European actors working together. What does the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and the American Revolution mean to you in light of what we've been speaking of?
What is to me the most important part when I moved here was to realize that even though it was not perfect, still is not perfect, it's such a long-standing democracy that was born out of rebellion, something that in Europe took a lot longer. We had monarchy in Italy until the Second World War. So I felt this sense of short but an incredibly strong history, a very fast pace, and I always found it very fascinating. And I truly enjoyed learning about it, and also living just 6 minutes away from Montpelier, the house of James Madison. He was a big contributor of drafting the Constitution. So it's strong.
It's amazing to see how the story of wine fits into the story of America's independence, both historically in terms of what was important culturally to Jefferson and other founders, but also the way that through the stories of yourself and of your colleagues, that legacy of what it means to be a Virginian and American is continuing. Luca Paschina, thank you so much for coming in to speak with me today.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you so much for having me.
Founding Footprints is a VA 250 project. America, made in Virginia. This podcast is a production of the Virginia Audio Collective at WTJU 91.1 FM. Hosted by Dr. Benjamin Bernard with sound design by Sage Tanguay, editing by Dana Sun, and music provided by Blue Dot Sessions. If you'd like to explore the history of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, you can find more information at visitcharlottesville.org. Virginia is for history lovers.